Imagine the sky over Berlin in 1944. You are a Luftwaffe pilot, a veteran. You have survived the Eastern Front. You have flown through flak so thick it turned the sky black. But now, as you look toward the horizon, the sky is no longer blue. It is silver. Thousands upon thousands of P-51 Mustangs and P-47 Thunderbolts descend like a swarm of hornets. This is the moment when the most experienced German pilots realized something they had never wanted to admit. The war was already lost. For years, the German Air Force had operated under a simple assumption. Once the escort fighters turned back, the bombers were vulnerable. The Luftwaffe could attack them with impunity. But in 1944, everything changed. The Americans installed external fuel tanks on their fighters. Tanks that could be dropped when combat began. This single modification transformed the entire air war over Europe. Suddenly, American fighters could escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back. They could fight over the target. They could hunt German fighters on the way home. Adolf Galland was one of Germany's greatest fighter aces. He had shot down over 100 enemy aircraft. He had survived countless missions. But in 1944, Galland made a statement that would echo through history. He said that the moment he saw American fighters over Berlin, he knew Germany had lost the war. Not because of any single battle, not because of any tactical defeat, but because it meant the Americans could do something the Germans simply could not. They could replace their losses. They could train new pilots faster than the Luftwaffe could kill them. They could build more aircraft than Germany could shoot down. The German pilots called these formations Jagdgeschwader, fighter wings. But the Americans had a different name for their tactics. They called it the Zemke Fan. Named after American Colonel Hubert Zemke, this strategy abandoned the defensive posture of escorting bombers. Instead, once the bombers reached their target, the American fighters would break formation and hunt. They would search for German fighters on the ground and in the air. They would strafe airfields. They would attack anything that moved. The Germans had never encountered anything like this before. What shocked German pilots most was not the performance of the American aircraft. The P-51 Mustang was indeed a magnificent machine, but German fighters like the Messerschmitt 109 and the Focke-Wulf 190 were comparable in many ways. What shocked them was the sheer number of American fighters, and the fact that they never seemed to run out. A German pilot might shoot down 3 American fighters in a single mission, but the next day, there would be 3 more, and the day after that, 3 more again. It was a war of attrition that Germany could never win. The psychological impact was devastating. German pilots, who had been heroes in their own country, who had survived years of combat, found themselves flying 5 or 6 missions per day against American pilots who were fresh, well-trained, and seemingly inexhaustible. The German pilot might have more experience. He might have better reflexes. But the American pilot had something more valuable. He had time. Time to learn. Time to improve. Time to survive long enough to become truly dangerous. By 1944, the average German fighter pilot had perhaps 200 hours of flight time before being sent into combat. The average American fighter pilot had over 300 hours. And that gap only widened as the war continued. German pilots were being rushed into combat with minimal training. American pilots were being held back, trained to perfection, and only then sent into the fight. When they did arrive, they arrived in overwhelming numbers. The German pilots also had to contend with something else that the Americans possessed in abundance: replacement aircraft. If an American fighter was damaged, it could be repaired. If it was destroyed, another would be built to replace it. The American aircraft industry was producing fighters faster than the Luftwaffe could shoot them down. Germany, by contrast, was struggling to maintain its existing fleet. Factories were being bombed. Resources were scarce. The Luftwaffe was fighting a war it could not win. One German pilot, after the war, described the experience of facing American fighter swarms. He said that it was like being surrounded by an enemy that never tired, an enemy that never made mistakes, an enemy that simply kept coming, wave after wave, without end. He said that the bravery of German pilots was never in question. But bravery alone cannot defeat an enemy with unlimited resources and unlimited determination. By the end of 1944, the Luftwaffe had effectively ceased to exist as a fighting force. German pilots were being held back, rationed like fuel. They were only sent into combat on the most critical missions. And even then, they were outnumbered by factors of 10 to 1 or more. The American air superiority was so complete that German ground forces could barely move during daylight hours. Every road was a potential killing ground. Every airfield was under constant threat. The German pilots who survived the war carried with them a profound understanding of what had happened. They had not been defeated by superior tactics. They had not been defeated by superior aircraft. They had been defeated by superior industrial capacity, by superior training systems, by a nation that had the resources to build not just enough fighters to win, but enough fighters to overwhelm any possible opposition. This was a lesson that would shape military thinking for decades to come. And it was a lesson written in the sky over Berlin, in the contrails of thousands of American fighters, and in the final desperate flights of the Luftwaffe's greatest aces. This is one of the wars that changed the world.